Hi, and welcome to the contingency plan. Is another civil war even possible? The short answer is no. In this video I'm going to examine the reasons why, giving you one less thing to worry about. The US Civil War took place in the 1860s. The country was an entirely different place back then. Almost nothing that exists today existed at that time. Trains, houses, and uncomfortable clothing are basically the entire list. There were no cars, no planes, no phones, no video games, no television, no radio, no internet, no real form of communication or information other than newspapers, handwritten letters, and word of mouth. The firearms were garbage. Getting from one place to another was a pain in the ass, and honestly there just wasn't a lot to do other than focus on daily survival. Here are some of the reasons a second civil war will never happen in the US. A lot of people don't truly understand just how large and spread out the United States is. California alone is the size of the Netherlands, Belgium, Slovenia, Switzerland, Austria, Luxembourg, Kosovo, and the Czech Republic combined. This is what Japan looks like compared to the United States. And India, with a population of 1.3 billion people, looks like this. The United States is large and spread out. In the 1860s, the majority of the population was concentrated in a relatively small area. We still had territories out west, and a lot of states like Wyoming, Idaho, and Colorado didn't even exist yet. It was possible to have a civil war due to the smaller area of heavily populated land. Drawing a line separating the Union from the Confederacy was rather simple. Today that line would be all over the place and nobody would know what side people were on. Speaking of sides, having almost everyone in one area made it relatively easy to draw a line and form a clear picture back in the day. As you can see, that's not so much the case today. Even individual states like Oregon and New Mexico are divided in half. And in Illinois, it's the entire state versus Chicago. Without a clear line in the sand, how exactly would you recognize the enemy? During the Civil War, each side also had a uniform. The Union in their snazzy blue, while the Confederate Army rocked this gray ensemble, or whatever they had lying around. They didn't have quite the resources that the North had. Today, it truly would be a war in which brother fought against brother, and neighbor against neighbor. Most people simply aren't going to commit to something as time-consuming as a civil war. 99% of people are still going to wake up every day, shower, and go to work. Or at least that will be their plan. They will have an opinion, but armoring up and joining the cause is going to seem a little extreme to most people who would rather just see how things play out on the cable news each night and stare at their phone. The vast majority of people simply don't have the stomach for war, and will just assume that others will take care of things and everything will be back to normal soon. People love to bitch about things on social media, but actually going outside, getting dirty, and being shot at, not so much. Okay, for the sake of argument, let's just say that a civil war does break out, and you've chosen a side, and you're super motivated to kick some ass. Who's in charge? Where do your orders come from? What's your first mission? Who's on your team? What does your chain of command look like? What do you wear? Or do you simply go lone wolf and be like ninja? This is very similar to the lack of an attention span already listed, but more deeply rooted. Unless people's phones stop working, they're just not going to get too worried about whatever's going on. Like with most things, until it impacts them directly, they will for the most part simply ignore whatever's taking place. By the time the bad guys show up on their porch, any choices they may have once had will be made for them. In my opinion, this is the biggest reason there will never be a second civil war in the United States. When you factor in how large the country is, how spread out the population is, the overall lack of motivation to get personally involved in actually killing people, the lack of leadership or any sort of structure, along with logistics, there's simply no way this will ever happen. One of, if not the most important part of any armed conflict is supplies. You run out of just about anything and it tends to take the fight right out of people. At worst, we could be looking at civil unrest in some of the larger cities like Baltimore and Detroit, but not a civil war. These isolated areas of conflict wouldn't last more than a few days or weeks at best. However, if something were to happen that made everyone's cell phones stop working, then all bets are off. Thank you for watching, and God bless each of you. Peace.